Today on The State of Us, a media shakeup. Carlson and Fox split, Lemon and CNN part ways. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal, and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson. Today, we're looking at Carlson is out at Fox News after disclosures of disparaging comments made against colleagues, and Don Lemon has been let go from CNN as well. Supposedly, we've got to talk about that, though, and there's a shakeup underway at NBC Universal, although not an on-air personality, possibly contributing to the departure of the CEO, former CEO of NBC Universal, and Comcast. A lot going on in the media landscape with high-profile individuals and talent, and we're going to talk about what do these things have in common, why are they different, and where might some of these mainstream media outlets been going? It feels like a long time, Lance, since we've actually done a show dedicated to the mainstream news, but it's probably about time for us to get on the high horse again.
Well, it just seems like all of them just fell off the wagon and started almost doing nothing but editorials that they played out as, well, this is the real news. And, it helped their ratings, but people now, maybe there's a little bit of a backlash against that. I hope that there's nothing wrong with editorials, but if you're going to present the news, shouldn't you just present the news? And that should be based on fact, not innuendos or different people speaking on the behalf of making things up. When you get into the Tucker Carlson thing, where he's having guests on that he then says off air are not speaking the truth. And why are we doing this? Then why are you reporting it as a quote news reporter? And then you have Mr. Lemon, who it seems like has a problem with females, with people from his opposite gender who don't fit the brand that he thinks they should. And again, where have you been? What rock have you been under for the last 120 years since, 100 years since women got the right to vote? I mean, come on, man. What's going on here? And then with CNBC, sexual harassment, admitting, I had an inappropriate relationship with a company employee. And for me, the real scary part is if that remains the tenor, which we'll talk about whether it will or not, where does artificial intelligence fall into all of this? As what's going to be presented as factual and news to the adoring public who wants to find out what the news is? Yeah, there's clearly an interest. You look at, for example, the rise of, my husband, for example, is a good demonstration of part of the shift in people still want to consume news. He consumes pretty much all of his news from YouTube, from independent creators, and these are independent creators that have garnered a reputation of providing a fair shake, going to multiple sources to pull information together and then kind of telling people, here's the situation. Now maybe I don't like the situation, but I'm going to tell you what the situation is, and I'm not going to try to skew the situation. What I think of the situation is a separate thing, but it's almost like what's happened, and we've talked about this a lot over the history of this program, is especially in the past, probably 20, 30 years, the last 2 or 3 decades, this intersection of commentary, which for the most part has always been around in some form or fashion in regards to current events. Since the dawn of the newspaper. I'm the old guy, and I don't mean to interrupt, but it used to say, this is a commentary on the news broadcast. So we got the news. Yeah. And then if somebody wanted a commentary, it said, now, this is a commentary. It no way reflects the views of this station or any others, blah, blah, blah. It is only of the person who, it was identified. And that's been not just blurred, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Right. Well, they don't care to make the distinction anymore between what programs are and aren't. And it's not just about labeling it, folks. It's also a philosophical mindset about what are we here to do? You know, is our job first and foremost to outline for you what's going on and then provide opinion for consideration? Is our primary job to provide you opinion, assuming that you already know the information? Or is our primary job, and this is the camp that I think we've fallen into, to entertain you for as long as possible so that we can milk you for all that you're worth? That's really, I mean, we're really not news or commentary anymore. We're some totally messed up hybrid thing that really isn't about giving you good commentary or giving you good news. It's about how do we mash these together, alarming things, how do we hyperbolize in order to keep you engaged? If you watch, you know, Tucker Carlson or Don Lemon or whoever, who, you know, these major media personalities, their shows almost always start out with something, you know, about what they think and how the world's gone to hell.
Well, and why is this important? Because it's swaying people's opinions as to what's happening in our country and in the world and how they vote and what their political outlooks are. I mean, that's why this is important. You wonder whether or not people are basing their political opinions and ideas and votes on factual information or on the entertainment that they've been given.
Well, I think you exhaust people too. I mean, we're going to talk about CNN in the second segment, but the approach to how you cover things, yes, there's things that keep people engaged longer, but it also can give them fatigue. If everything is always terrible, if every event is always an attack, if everything is always awful, it gets very wearing.
But do you think that it causes this divide? It possibly could have caused this divide that we have in the country?
I think it certainly contributes.
I mean, because
to it.
You call it fatigue, but if that's all you're hearing, then the other side is bad.
What happens
I don't care which
when
side you're on?
When you get fatigued, you get angry. I mean, right? I mean,
right.
as people,
okay.
Right? I mean, you get tired and worn out. What happens? Your patience is diminished, and you're much more likely to snap at somebody or to draw quick conclusions or to assume things that aren't true. All these things that lead to, if you're in a disagreement with somebody, much more likely for it to go south instead of it being a civil disagreement and become a argument and or fight because you're upset. But as it pertains to Fox, they said on Monday that Mr. Carlson's last show was on Friday. Fox News parent Fox Corp agreed to pay $787 million to settle its legal battle with Dominion Voting Systems, which had accused Fox News networks of airing false claims by hosts and guests that Dominion helped rig the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election in favor of Joe Biden. Mr. Carlson had been expected to testify during that trial. In sum, Mr. Carlson mocked claims made by on-air guests, said he hated Donald Trump, and complained about colleagues and Fox executives. These are private messages sent by Mr. Carlson to colleagues that were made public in the legal proceedings of the Dominion defamation suit. Quote, "Do the executives understand how much credibility and trust we've lost with our audience?" Mr. Carlson wrote in a text message to his producer in the aftermath of the election, according to court documents. "We're playing with fire for real."
You know, to our Fox viewers out there who listen to us,
we have a lot of those.
We do, but I don't want to diminish this by saying, well, see, Tucker Carlson didn't like Donald Trump and you know, he called these people liars, so it's a good thing he's gone. That's not the point here, folks, okay? The point is he realized himself after looking at everything, and there's another piece in there where he plays the other side and says, we need to fire this fact checker who claims that there is no fraud in the election. You know, so he's playing both sides of the street here. And my problem with that is he never was really reporting the news to us. He was, in Justin's word, entertaining us and not giving us factual information, or he was skewing it, or hyperbolizing it to the point that it wasn't the news. So don't just say, well, I'm glad he's gone from Fox because he was talking bad about former President Trump and the Fox people he was working with. To me, that's not the point at all. Here's my commentary, okay? And that is, the point is, he was knowingly having guests on who he felt were lying. His fact checkers were telling him they were lying. And he was still going on air and selling you this crock of garbage. Now, to our more liberal listeners, which we have those as well, this isn't like, ha, 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 we got Tucker Carlson. You know, you should be it's not the person, it's the idea of what was happening on his show. Let's focus, please, if we can, on the fact that this person went on air and knowingly misplayed the truth as the truth to us. Not, oh, I'm glad he's gone for this reason or that reason. That to me, that's what we need to discuss the rest of the show.
Well, and we're going to talk about CNN next and what's been going on there, because actually of the major networks, CNN has seen a 24% drop out of all the networks measured year-over-year declines, the largest of any network. And it's been steadily decreasing for the past number of years. So we're going to talk about what's going on there. How does Don Lemon's departure signal maybe something about CNN? And what is this new thing that they're, quote unquote, going to try? Because it does play into the Fox thing. It talks about, is there a shift underway in the media landscape? Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. CNN Chairman and Chief Executive Chris Litch said in a company-wide email Monday that Mr. Lemon was departing the network. He didn't give a reason why Mr. Lemon was leaving. Mr. Lemon taped his last show on Monday morning. The move comes 2 months after Mr. Lemon drew criticism on CNN this morning for saying Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley wasn't in her prime. His departure is the third significant media industry staffing change in 2 days. Fox News obviously saying Monday that Tucker Carlson was leaving. The network's highest-rated primetime host taped his final show last week, and NBC Universal, a division of Comcast, said Sunday that its chief executive, Jeff Shell, was departing after an investigation into a complaint of inappropriate conduct. Mr. Lemon has been one of CNN's most recognizable faces in recent years. He joined the network in 2006 as a reporter, and in 2014 began anchoring the primetime show Don Lemon Tonight. He switched to the morning side in November to co-host CNN This Morning, working out of the new network's New York bureau. After 17 years at CNN, I would have thought that someone in management would have had the decency to tell me directly, Mr. Lemon said Monday. At no time was I ever given any indication that I would not be able to continue to do the work I have loved at the network. CNN disputed Mr. Lemon's statement, saying that the network offered him an opportunity to meet its management, but he instead released a statement on Twitter. One of Mr. Litch's deputies contacted Mr. Lemon's agent and said the network no longer wanted his services at CNN, a person familiar with the matter said. The deputy also offered Mr. Lemon a meeting with Human Resources and Mr. Litch, the person said. CNN This Morning, which launched in November, was down more than 23% in ratings in the first quarter of late March compared with its predecessor, CNN New Day, during the same period last year, according to Nielsen. CNN This Morning had drawn 359,000 viewers compared with 844,000 for MSNBC's Morning Joe and more than 1.2 million for Fox and Friends, according to Nielsen data.
But isn't it interesting that Fox pays out for a lawsuit and then CNN sees its show drop by 25% in viewership and we have a change in host? Does that mean if the lawsuit wouldn't have happened and CNN wouldn't have lost its viewers, these people would still have jobs? that's what's making this, the executives, what's making their decision? Is it the fact they're losing money because, one, Fox is losing money because they're paying, huge sums of the lawsuit plus buying out the rest of Tucker Carlson's contract. And CNN obviously is losing ad dollars because their audience has fallen by almost 25%. So is this what these people have said or done, or is the fact that they're losing the money? And that's the fear I have. Are we going to get a revamped because, this isn't going to work with these people, we're going to keep doing the same things? Or will we get a total revamp and, we're going to go back to reporting the news and identify what's commentary and what's not? Because you look at Mr. Lemon, as we kind of hinted at in the first segment, he has a problem with seeing women as equals. I mean, he says the men's soccer team should be paid more than the women because they're more entertaining, even though they play the same number of minutes. They're training, coaching. The women have been fighting for equal pay. He says a 57-year-old politician is out of their prime. He says, my 17 years at CNN, okay, were you doing that kind of stuff your first 10 years?
Right.
Or did you get this highfalutin opinion of yourself?
And then you thought you could
get away with it? Or, where I think it is, were you doing this to gain ratings?
Mm-hmm.
And then to the point that the article also points out that guests would no longer come onto the show because of his comments.
Right.
So it backfired on him. So again, are we doing this for the moralistic reasons that they were doing something wrong, or are we doing it because they can't make us money anymore? That's my question, and it's a concern because I hope we're doing it for moralistic reasons. I wonder if we're not just doing it because they were hurting the bottom line.
So Litch, the chairman of CNN, who took over last year, and then also the Warner Brothers Discovery CEO, have made it a priority to dial back on partisan programming at CNN in favor of traditional journalism, according to Axios. Last June, a note from Litch obtained by Axios said, "We are truth tellers focused on informing, not alarming our viewers. You've already seen far less of the breaking news banner across our programming." And as of June of last year, CNN had added a new guideline to its style book to address overuse of the breaking news banner across its network and cable news writ large. It has become such a fixture on every channel on the network that its impact has become lost on the audience, he said. To address the issue, CNN bureau chief Sam Feist has led a team in building out, quote, breaking news guidelines for CNN's style book, per the note. It certainly will need tweaks, so we're open to feedback, but this is a great starting point to try to make breaking news mean something big is happening. We had a joke when our studio was in Cincinnati, Ohio. And oh, by the way, I guess we should tell folks that we're in a new studio location, not far down the road from where we were. But if you've heard different broadcasts or maybe some different sound quality the past 2 weeks or whatever it might be, we appreciate you sticking with us. We've been in a transition. We're finally mostly situated at our new location. We're now in the heart of downtown Urbana. So we were outside of city limits before, but now we're in the middle of things, in the thick of it.
Where all the action is. If you ever get to visit Urbana, we're right down here on Monument Square. Come and visit us.
There is a lot of traffic. I don't know what they're all doing, but there is a lot of traffic, a lot of through. For those that don't know, local politics would tell you something about why we don't have an interstate bypass around the city of Urbana. So everybody's got to come straight through Urbana for the 2 U.S. routes and 3 intersecting state routes or something like that come through here. So a lot of people moving through.
Not a lot of people stopping.
Well, right. Working on that, though.
They're beating up our roads, but not giving us their money. So
that's right. Aren't you one of those people that lives outside city limits and doesn't have to pay city taxes, but uses our roads all the time?
No, I don't come in this way very often. Yeah. I try not to come into town if I don't have to.
Gotcha. So anyway, the
That
point,
friendly redneck liberal, I just stay out in the boonies.
I mean, CNN's been hurting for a while, ratings declining. We had a joke when our studio was in Cincinnati. You walk into the lobby and CNN's what they had on the lobby, TV. And we'd always say, what's on CNN breaking news today? Because literally, I mean, the breaking news banner was basically 99% of the time present on their air. It's like what's the point? And you might say, well, is that really that big a deal? Like, I mean, okay, you're calling it breaking news, but it's part of a larger philosophical thing about, is this urgent? Is this really something that somebody has to know about right now? Is there a lot of bad stuff going on? Of course, but there always has been a lot of bad stuff going on. We don't have, a monopoly on it now. And I think that the news makes it feel like there's more bad things going on because we elevate each of those things again and again and again, instead of saying, well, really, this has been going on for 30 years. That doesn't mean it's not bad, but also like it's been going on for 30 years. So some perspective here of just because you're learning about it today doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. Now, should we do something about it? Sure. But again, how much does news focus on just telling us why this is so terrible, and the commentary being focused on why this is so bad and how wrong everybody else is? How often are you hearing real productive conversation about where to go from here? You want to talk about commentary that matters? I don't hear much of that commentary on mainstream news. Most of the commentary is, here's why this is bad. Here's why this person is wrong. Here's why we should be upset. That's most of what it is. And what good does that do? It's not rhetorical. I am actually asking our audience, can somebody tell me what value that provides to society? Because I don't know, other than feeling like somebody else is also upset, what value is being brought to the table? We're going to talk about CNBC in the last piece of this shakeup across media. A number of different things going on. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. CNBC's decided, I guess CNBC hasn't decided, NBC Universal, and one of the on-air talents at CNBC has brought forward information that has possibly culminated or contributed to the departure of the CEO of NBC Universal, which is owned by Comcast. So what's going on here, Lance?
Well, CBC International anchor Hadley Gamble accused former NBC Universal chief executive Jeff Shell of sexual harassment and sex discrimination in a complaint to the company. This was reported by a lawyer for Ms. Gamble. Mr. Shell, in response, was fired for cause, and the company doesn't intend to pay him severance. People familiar with the situation said this week. CNBC is owned by NBC Universal. In a statement earlier this week, Mr. Shell said he had an inappropriate relationship with a company employee. Quote, "I'm truly sorry I let my Comcast and NBC Universal colleagues down." There's a contract, right, that says, it's very normal, isn't it, now in today's business world, that you're not supposed to have any kind of personal relationship outside of work with somebody who works for the company. I mean, that's a very common thing, isn't it? And we found it, I know that I think some fast food people have had trouble with that, where they started seeing people that they were working with, in an intimate way. And again, here's another person who in the news media becomes so powerful or so power hungry that they break their contract. And then he's not denying that this went on. He's like, yeah, I did it. Why did you know? Why did you knowingly do something that was going to get you fired? I just don't, that doesn't register with me.
He said, we all have our likes and dislikes. This is Walter Cronkite. But when we're doing news, when we're doing the front page news, not the back page, not the op-ed pages, but when we're doing the daily news covering politics, it is our duty to be sure that we do not permit our prejudices to show. That is simply basic journalism.
And see, that leads to and here's the old man, right? Change in delivery of the news. I mean, I remember, I'm old enough, right? I remember when CNN came on, mogul Ted Turner started the first 24-hour news station in Atlanta, CNN. Before then, most of your news was digested by your town's morning newspaper and then the afternoon newspaper. I mean, when I was growing up, almost every town had a morning newspaper and an evening newspaper, or two evening newspapers, but there were rival newspapers in town reporting the news. And your news consisted of a half an hour of local news and a half an hour of national news. There's nothing, the quiet was supposed to be there, okay? Because there was nothing else. When I grew up, you could pick up one of two newspapers that your town put out for print every day, or you could sit down during the dinner hour and watch a half an hour of local news and a half an hour of national news, i.e. Walter Cronkite on CBS. And that was it. And the thing was, everybody sat, if you wanted to know the news, that's when you watched it. There was no streaming. There was no putting it on a DVR and then watching it later. There was no tuning into it, and I understand we can't go back to that. But I think we also have to admit then that the way the news is delivered has created some of these problems that we're discussing today. You quoted Walter Cronkite. He would not recognize a news station or an anchor desk if he walked into it today. And could he do his job the way he did it 50 years ago? Could he do that today? Because there's this story by President Lyndon Johnson, who's watching the news in 1968, and Walter Cronkite makes some negative comment about government policy towards Vietnam. And Johnson goes, if we've lost Walter, we've lost the country. And nobody could understand that today, because if Walter Cronkite had the majority of the country listening to his news broadcast. And we don't have that today because, like you said, your husband, he gets it off of YouTubers. Other people we've talked about before, if you look up certain stories, then that little algorithm will just keep feeding you stories like that. Or you watch a variety of people on your national media preference, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, or Fox. And so, those are all set up to lead you from one thing to another, and you're basically getting one viewpoint all the time. That's not the way the news was delivered 50 years ago. So I know we can't change it, but I wonder how many of our problems are being caused by this disparity, this difference in the way news is consumed and the way news is presented.
Walter Cronkite, near the end of his career, said, "The democratic system is challenged by the failure in television because our evening news programs have gone for an attempt to entertain as much as to inform in the desperate fight for ratings." And I would go the step further today and say they're not going equally for them. They're going strictly for the entertainment in the desperate attempt for ratings. Ironically, what we talk about in education, Lance, setting a standard, setting a bar, rising to the occasion, it's almost like we've lowered the bar in news and what we expect from journalism, what we expect from our reporters. And in doing so, the name of the game was to get more ratings, and ironically, less people consume proportionally to the population of the country, less people consume traditional news today than they did 40 years ago before this shift, really started to kick up. So
just like lowering the bar in education,
right?
Because we need to get more kids to pass. Now there are fewer children.
Right. Now there's less children
getting an education, even though the bar has been lowered on what you need to do to earn that diploma.
Making it easier doesn't necessarily mean there will be more success. Walter also said, and I think this one is the one that to me really strikes home that I think a lot of people don't talk about. We have more and more one newspaper towns, and that troubles me. Walter Cronkite. What you said, Lance, you think about how has the news changed over the past 40 years? That's a huge one. There are lots of communities that have no local news other than what's said on Facebook. And you might say, well, how detrimental is that? Well, for one, when you think about small towns, even big towns, having two or more competing news entities, they have to be tuned in to what people are willing to put up with. They have to aggressively go after local news because they have to offer something the other guy's not. So there's a competition and a healthy dose of it.
Competition
that drives them to be good, not to, be down on our local news, because I'm glad that we have a local newspaper, but the fact that we only have one isn't good because it means
they just cut back on the number of days.
Right.
They're printing.
And they didn't change their price.
Right.
And they don't have to. I think about if you look at historically the number of newspapers that were in Champaign County, which is the county that we're in, versus today, it's drastically different. The other thing is the breadth of coverage in those papers of local and national that was taking place, far different than it is today. And you're going to say, well, most people don't read the newspaper. Right. I get that. What I'm saying is that's part of the problem, is not that we all need to be reading, the physical newspaper. I'm picking up a physical newspaper, by the way, here that's on the desk. Not that we all need to be doing that, but the fact that has gone away and we really haven't provided a 1-for-1 digital replacement. We really haven't. Most news has shifted toward national affairs, and that's not healthy either. But it's the medium, right? It's the notion that this is assembled by people in your community who this is their job. It's their livelihood to be successful at this. So much of that's gone away, and our attention has become so centralized and nationalized that you say, well, why is that important? Well, we're less connected locally. And what does that do? We've talked about that leads to a lack of empathy. It's very hard to relate to things on a national level for anybody because we're not wired that way. We talked about why is social media so damaging to big influencers? Why do they have so many personality problems? We're not wired to perceive at scale what millions of people believe of us. We're not really even wired to perceive what 1,000 people think of us. At most, at one time, the human capacity for relationships is somewhere between like 10 and 30 people. That's what we're able to maintain reasonably close connections with at any one given time. And you think about, okay, so if you're doing 100 or 1,000 times that many people who are providing their input on what you do and what you think, we're not designed to handle that. So why would we think that we're designed to handle news that's presented in the same way?
Well, and everything you said was true, but I'm going to go back to earlier in your statement. You used one word that we've done many shows talking about, but never one just about the word itself, and that is competition. So we've done so much because people are afraid of failure, or young people are afraid of failure, and parents want to protect their young people, that, in my opinion, there's not enough competition out there because, as you stated, and I'm just echoing it, competition drives you to be better.
And it doesn't have to be mean competition.
I'm not talking about bullying. I'm not talking about, but just the true fact of competition makes you strive to be better. And then what does that do if somebody passes you? Well, if you're competitive, then you strive to pass them back. And then if you do that repeatedly, then what happens? You not only get better, they get better, and society gets better.
Yeah.
Everybody's moving upwards instead of staying status quo because, well, we don't want to be seen as, one, a failure, or two, hurting someone else because we're trying to get better. Well, you're better than me and you think you're better than me. And that competition is what makes us a worthy country. And I think we've just lost a lot of that, to your point. There is no competition in newspapers anymore.
One of those things that comes to mind when we talk about that is the lowest common denominator principle. I've talked about that a number of times on our show. I believe that our job is to challenge people because that's how we all get better. They need to challenge us. They should expect more from us. We just heard from a new listener the other day, Lance, in fact, who said, I only listen to the ones of your programs that I think I'm going to be interested in, but every time I listen to one of those, I'm always amazed at it's not what I thought it was going to be, and not in a bad way, but in you think you know what it's going to be and then it's not. And that means that you're being challenged. You're having to think.
And because of that, they've begun, they said, listening to more shows because they like the fact that they can't predict what's going to be said. And then it makes them use their brain to follow along and to think more deeply or in a different way about the given topic that we're discussing.
You can be challenged without being made to feel less than, and you can grow through competition without it being evil. We've confused healthy competition and bullying and belittling, and that's not competition. That's just stupid. That's what a lot of our news is, quote unquote news is. It's just, how do we make the other people seem dumb and small? That's what we're doing. And that's not at all what we should be about. It should be, here's what's going on. What do you think about it? How are you processing it? What questions should we be asking? Who should we be talking to for answers? It's a totally different mindset. And the competition has more to do with you getting better by other people pushing you than it has to do with you tearing somebody else down. Why do we have this show today, Lance?
Well, because here at True Chat, we have a mission. And that mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And if you like today's show and you share it, and family and friends and coworkers say, well, I'd like to start listening to that on my own, where can I find it? And you can tell them they can find us wherever they find their podcast. Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast. It's easy to find. Look it up, listen to it, tune in.
The State of Us releases new episodes as a podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning. Those same episodes heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States and parts of Canada. For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.